Nerds, I have Professor David Nemer here with me, who is from the University of Virginia, and he is an expert on many things, but one of them is around social media and news and misinformation, which I know is a hot topic. So we're going to get into it, but before we do that, let's warm it up. Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
David, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Tom. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's a beautiful sunny day in California right now. What's it like in Virginia?
Well, I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts now. It's cold, but it's sunny outside, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, Cambridge, Mass. I mean, you guys are going to get some snow, I hear, right?
Yeah, we did. But it's a beautiful day. It's blue skies, so can't complain.
Yeah, I spent many good years in Central Square. Fond memories. Was offered by my landlord at the time the opportunity to buy the townhouse we were in, and should have totally taken her up on it. But hindsight's 2020, right? So David, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you research, but also like who you are and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm David Nemer. I'm originally from Brazil. I'm an assistant professor of media studies at the University of Virginia, but I'm currently on my sabbatical leave. So I am a visiting professor and associate faculty at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. So for those who think that professors, when they go on sabbatical leave, they go to beaches and somewhere nice, that's not true. I'm here in the cold weather of Cambridge, Massachusetts, researching misinformation. So this has been my newest research project, which I'm looking into the ways that folks organize around misinformation to promote political campaigns. And the reason why I'm doing this one this year specifically is because Brazil, we're going to have the 2022 elections in October. And the same way that it happened in 2018, it seems like misinformation is going to play a big role. I've been researching misinformation in Brazil since 2018. I've been one of the few ones that have gone to WhatsApp to understand how misinformation works when there's no algorithm behind the platform to curate and distribute misinformation. So I've been looking into the human infrastructure that works just like an algorithm to make sure that the misinformation will get into people's pockets. In 2018, WhatsApp was a big thing. In 2022, Telegram now is the new big thing in Brazil in terms of this major play in misinformation. But apart from that, I've been doing work in the favelas of Brazil, which are the shanty towns of the country. My book just came out, Technology of the Oppressed. It's based on a 10-year research project that I'm looking into the ways that residents of favela use technology to liberate themselves from ongoing oppressions in the world.
Super cool. First question, what is misinformation?
Oh boy. We're going to get very mad on here, huh?
Yeah.
So that's a very good question because misinformation means so many things, right? So we have misinformation that is some sort of a naive mistake, right? Sometimes people share old news as if they were new news, right? That's misinformation. But there's also that misinformation that is deliberately aimed at disinforming. So that's called disinformation. So whenever there is an effort, a campaign to disinform, then that's called disinformation. Misinformation can also come in forms of clickbait, right? When we have sensationalist headlines trying to attract traffic to a given article, when you get to those articles, it's nothing but ads. Yeah, clickbait. or maybe to generate traffic so they can monetize over ads on their platforms. It's also misinformation. So it's anything that tries to trick someone's knowledge about a topic. Sometimes it can be done naively, but sometimes it can be done with a lot of intention. But the outcome is never good. It's always, unfortunately, bad.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I know from the recent debates over COVID vaccinations, each side was claiming the other side was promoting misinformation, either misinformation that the vaccine is unsafe, or the other side would say, no, that's misinformation that you're saying the vaccine is safe. And it seems like it's that term has been used kind of and stretched a little bit for different purposes. Do you find that that makes it harder for you to really unpack it, or do you have a pretty good framework for deciding what is misinformation versus just people disagreeing about something?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes it hard to unpack it because if we were to put people in two different camps, one camp is based on science, in the traditional ways of making knowledge, like they believe in the sciences that come from academia, from research institutes. The other side believe in the so-called pseudoscience that comes from conspiracy theories, the hidden truth, the ones that governments and power elites don't want you to see.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with social media is that now, before we used to go to academia to search for knowledge, to search for information, right? But now
Mm-hmm.
social media, unfortunately, has been equated as this repository of knowledge that has as legitimate knowledge as the other places like academia. So it's hard to compete because the language that we produce in academia is not as accessible as it is in social media, right? And we have rules in academia. We can't just say whatever we want. We go through peer review. We go through editorial um, processes. Whereas in
Mm-hmm.
social media, you post, it's like they say, if it's on the internet, that must be true. So then people buy it. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the challenges is that most of the time, misinformation comes loaded with some sort of emotion. So it's an information that promotes some sort of commotion into humans, and that's how humans get attached to it. So this is why it's so hard to deconstruct misinformation, because it doesn't matter if you bring all the facts, because these people are emotionally
Yeah.
invested in that misinformation. It's like debating faith, right? You can't tell that one God is better than the other because it's based on completely different emotional knowledge and emotional intelligence that is making people believe in that God. So the same thing that people want to believe that by getting a vaccine, you will implant a 5G chip in you. No, it's not. It's rationally impossible to believe in that, and very easy to prove that it is wrong. But the thing is, they don't want to believe in facts. They want to believe their own emotions, their own conspiracy theories, and that's what makes it hard to deconstruct misinformation.
Yeah, I noticed I was in a Twitter debate with someone a week ago, and I had shared a published study in the Journal of the American Medical Association about the ineffectiveness of ivermectin at treating COVID. And I said, well, look, there's a peer reviewed study and there's a test and control group. And like the conclusion was that it was not effective. And then people on the sort of other perspective or the other side replied, oh, no, you need to read this link. And it was a link to a Substack like article that someone self published claiming to have disproven all this stuff. And I didn't say this. I chose not to engage further in that thread. But it's like, really, are you telling me this guy on Substack has more credibility than JAMA? Like, seriously? Like the amount of kind of rigor that's required to publish in a peer-reviewed, like well-respected academic journal like that is going to be much higher than what it takes. I mean, I could publish something on Substack today. It's like a blog, basically. Um, but because of that, like people treat a link to something that sounds credible as a source of information. And I don't know if that's necessarily misinformation, but it's there's definitely this continuum from misinformation to just like misguided people.
Right. And this is one of the problems of believing that whatever is on the internet must be true, is because
Mhm.
one, these social media platforms were not built with discussion in mind, right? They
Mhm.
all had original designs and thoughts in the beginning, like Facebook wanted to be a dating website to start off, right?
Mhm.
So the discussion was never really part of the design of these platforms. It evolved to it. Engaging in conversation in these platforms are problematic, but it gets even worse. I mean, it's possible, but it gets even worse when you're debating something like a scientific fact. Then you can find anything on the internet, right? You can find any article that will support
Right.
your worldview. So if you think that the sky is red, I'm sure you can find an article on the internet that will prove with some crazy science that the sky is red. It's your eye that has a problem that is
Mhm.
thinking it's blue. So this is what most of online discussions have come to. It's like you have your point and you brought a credible journal article, but other people will find some other link to support the view.
Yeah.
No matter how much you try to rebut that, they will always find something else to stick to the point. So you get out of that debate not getting frustrated because it didn't evolve with your
Mm.
point of view, with your knowledge, and the other one got out of that debate knowing that what he knows is what he believes and what is right. So we don't evolve. Like we got stuck to whatever truth we want to believe.
And do you think this is new, or is it just sort of accelerated by technology? Like if we were talking 50 years ago, would there, I mean, I'm guessing there were pamphlets and well, maybe not emails, but there were, magazines, sort of fringe magazines and things like that. How new is what we're observing now?
Right. It's not new, right?
Yeah.
Misinformation has always been around, especially in political campaigns, as we know.
Mhm.
Um, but the problem is that with social media, that sort of misinformation has been amplified. And what I mean by this is that now we have actors that are bringing misinformation, conspiracy theories that used to belong to the periphery of the
Right.
public debate to the center of the public debate. I think that is a problem. I mean, this is why we have the insurgency at the Capitol building, right? Because people start believing in crazy facts about the elections, which were not
Mhm.
true. So this is where the problem is. By allowing these people take advantage of their image or fame on this platform and bringing this misinformation, conspiracy theories to the center of the public debate. Once it's on the periphery, of course, it's not good, but the periphery, belonging to the periphery, that mitigates the effects of misinformation. So we always, we've always had anti-vaxxers among us.
Yep.
We've always had the ones who believe in the Illuminati, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't until we've had social media that we had something like QAnon that promoted the invasion of the Capitol building, which was, to me, the biggest um, assault in the U.S. democracy so far.
Mm.
So why is that happening? It's because we're allowing these people to be fed with misinformation with those who are on top, and it should have been an example to to those folks, but they don't. They take advantage of the power that they have. This is why deplatforming works really well, but it's limited as well. Like what happened to Donald Trump? He got banned from Twitter, and this is called deplatforming. And after he got banned from Twitter, then the misinformation about elections got down by like a crazy number. Like
Mhm.
I'm gonna guess here 60%, but it was something crazy like that. So if Twitter had done this before, then I'm sure that the outcome would have been different. They tried to tell the normal user that Parler and Getter were the ones to blame, but no, these conversations were actually happening on Twitter because Parler and Getter so far occupy that sort of periphery in terms of debate. Twitter is at the center. And this is exactly where Trump tweeted for the first time about the wild protests. So deplatforming works, and if if these platforms want to put their profit over democracy, then it becomes a problem, right? Because as we know, engagement is what generate data, thus generate income to these platforms. And of course, deplatforming people who generate a lot of engagements will compromise the platform's income.
It is such a delicate topic because in this case, I'm very okay with Twitter deciding to kick President Trump off the platform, given all the damage he did using that platform. On the other hand, like, I don't know how I would feel if Twitter kicked off like someone that maybe was more on the other side of the political spectrum and said, "Oh, this particular political leader is too far out there." I mean, it is uncomfortable to think like who is the arbiter of what's misinformation, and why should Twitter be making that call in some conference room?
Right. I think this is the big question mark that we have right now. But I think the number one problem is a lack of transparency of these platforms, right? So why did Twitter kicked out Trump, but then it's keeping Bolsonaro, who's the president of Brazil, who says things way worse than Trump? Why one and not the other? Like they banned Marjorie Taylor Greene, whereas in Brazil we have all the other Congresses also saying like crazy things like she was. So this double standard and lack of transparency is actually what leads us to not have a clear sense of what would be the truth or what would be misinformation. Of course, that it's hard to be the referee in terms of what is truth and what is not, but there is some sort of objectivity to truth. So truth is not so subjective that anything can be real or right or wrong. There is some sort of objective that allows us to make this claim. It allows the platforms to make these claims. They make these claims all the time when they keep people out of their platforms, right? Nowadays, for example, death threats on Twitter, they're not as objective as they used to be. For example, people won't just say, I'm going to go out and go to your house and kill you. People say in very subtle ways, and Twitter is able to identify that. So taking away the responsibility from the platforms by saying that this is something that is not quite easy to do, I think that's not really the right way. I think they can do it. And again, just being at least if they don't want to do this like following some sort of guidelines, at least they should be transparent. So at least we have some sort of expectation on what to see on this platform. I think that could be a better way to address this.
It reminds me of a news story last week about President Trump's own social media platform, Truth Social. And I think the terms of service indicate that you are not allowed to disparage the platform or the funders of the platform. And so it's kind of, I mean, they're going to experience it too. Like, what are they going to do if someone infiltrates their platform and starts saying all these kind of progressive things, or challenges, the veracity of President Trump's words? Definitely, it feels like uncharted territory. In the old days, it was very clear, like if you yelled fire in a crowded theater, like, okay, that person's doing something wrong. Now it's like, okay, you retweet something about some conspiracy about a rigged election. Like, I don't know, like, is that the same as yelling fire? Maybe if you only have 100 followers, but if you have 100 million followers, like, does a bar change? Have you looked into, or what's your take on how society should govern this kind of activity, or is it even possible and we just let market forces kind of determine it?
Yeah, well, definitely not let this to the full desires of the market forces, because they would do however they please in terms of optimizing their income. But I was born and raised in Brazil, and our freedom of expression, the laws that protect freedom of expression, it's regulated the same way that it is here, right? Sometimes we get the impression that the First Amendment gives us unrestricted freedom of expression, which is not true. Like, as you mentioned, we cannot go into a theater and yell fire. In Brazil, for example, hate speech is not protected by freedom of speech. The same way in Europe, it's not. So the U.S. is one of the few countries that protects hate speech as part of freedom of speech. Anyways, so in Brazil, like, you cannot have a racist opinion. You cannot have a homophobic opinion or xenophobic opinion. That is a crime. However, these platforms, because they are based in the U.S., then they don't see it this way. So they allow these sort of content to, be posted and shared wide. However, it gets into a clash with the local, with the national laws, because then they say that we're not the judge of, what is racist, what is truth, what is wrong. But at the same time, it's breaking the law. So this is what I try to say, that informations are not as subjective as we sometimes want to think they are. And this is complicating the ways that these platforms are trying to become global, right? One of the examples is Telegram. Telegram is becoming the next big messaging app right behind WhatsApp. And now Telegram is actually about to be banned in Brazil because this app, for example, you can search for public groups that disseminate Nazi content, disseminate racist comment. Although this might be legal here in the US, in Brazil it's not. And Telegram is refusing to get in conversations with the Supreme Court, for example. The Supreme Court is actually being proactive in terms of trying to understand what the platform is doing to contain hate speech and misinformation. They don't have any sort of legal representation in Brazil. So the Supreme Court has their hands tied, because they can't really fine or they can't really arrest anybody because there's no representation there. So the only solution now is to ban the app, which is very problematic because Telegram is on 53% of Brazilian cell phones. So it's a public utility in the country. So banning the app will maybe help with misinformation and hate speech, but you're also going to be banning people that are there to talk to family, friends, where they do their business, where they meet for work, for school. So of course, the app is way bigger than just misinformation. But then the options there are very limited because the platform is not there to talk to the Supreme Court, which is different from, example, Facebook and Twitter, were engaging with the Supreme Court to help mitigate the consequences of misinformation in the country.
Your topic of Telegram is super interesting because I think narrative around, let's just say Facebook, but you could apply to other social media platforms, is that they algorithmically optimize for more user engagement, and users tend to engage more with controversial kind of crazy stuff. And then it just became this like vicious circle. How is information spread in a Telegram world where there is no algorithmic recommendation? Do you still see it spread?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is what I've been trying to investigate in Brazil. So in 2018, for example, WhatsApp, which works just the same way that Telegram does, WhatsApp was a big thing. And because there was no algorithm, then a human infrastructure was put into place to work just like an algorithm to make sure that the misinformation were being spread across different groups and across different people. So I got myself into 5 pro-Bolsonaro WhatsApp groups where people were talking about and trying to promote Bolsonaro as much as they could. But I realized that this human infrastructure of misinformation worked in a pyramid scheme. Not in a Ponzi scheme, but like a pyramid, where at the top you had what I call the influencers, which were the people that didn't participate as much in those groups, but they were the ones creating or bringing new misinformation into the groups. And then on the second level, the base level, which worked like a glue into this misinformation infrastructure, were the Boso army. They work just like the beehive that works to defend Beyonce everywhere you go on the internet. They would crawl across the internet trying to find things that posts that were trying to hurt Bolsonaro, and they would bring people there to attack those people. But also, they would bring the misinformation posted by the influencers, and they were the ones bringing to different groups. So they were the ones infiltrated in the church groups, in the soccer groups, in the family groups. They knew all kinds of people. So they were making sure to spread that information as wide as they could to get that misinformation into the pockets of the people. And then at the base of this pyramid, that's what I call the average Brazilians, that they were in these groups basically to get to know Bolsonaro more, because Bolsonaro was not really known. So they were consuming misinformation. So this infrastructure had those who produced, those who spread, and those who consumed. So unfortunately, it was a perfect ecosystem to promote somebody based on misinformation.
You could argue that that's how religion spread too. That there's some, initial narrative, and then there's apostles or whatever you want to call them that go out and evangelize, and then there's the people.
It's not surprising that we say that QAnon works just like a cult. The far right also needs this emotional charge to it. That's why they work like a cult. They need this sort of a idol figure to build their cults around, right? So Q is the idol, right? In Brazil, Bolsonaro would be this idol.
I'm curious about your research and knowledge of sort of the favelas and sort of the folks who are perhaps a little bit left behind economically. One of the things I noticed around the rise of Trump was that it came from a place of economic anxiety for a lot of people, and maybe also a little bit of like anxiety around cultural changes and things. And then this narrative played into that emotional fear, like, oh well, this is a guy that is going to conquer the evil opposition and make the country great again, and therefore I'll be better off and my anxiety will go away. I'm curious, do you notice an openness to misinformation from different parts of society based on their kind of economic comfort level or lack thereof, or any connection to that?
I did, and that's a very good point, because it was the same sort of class sector here in the U.S. that supported Trump was in Brazil as well. So the middle class was the part, the social class that actually wanted to support and promote Bolsonaro as much as they could, because of this anxiety, of progressive changes that were also happening in Brazil. Before Bolsonaro, we had the Workers' Party, which leans to the left, that were promoting all kinds of progressive changes. But there was also a big chunk of the lower classes supporting Bolsonaro. And this is because the Workers' Party came from this long trajectory of promoting social welfare and social programs to kind of help including those people. But unfortunately, Brazil got in one of the worst economic crises around 2014, and which led to the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. But that crisis, as you can imagine, hurt the poor the most. So they thought, something was given to us and then it was taken from us. So there was some sort of resentment there that allowed them to support something new, and the new thing was Bolsonaro. So I'm just making a very short summary here. It's way more nuanced than this, but this explains a little bit why the lower classes also supported Bolsonaro. But in terms of misinformation, the same way that we do here in Brazil is the same way. We tend to blame the poor for all of our problems, right? All of our social problems. In the same way that happened there with the rise of Bolsonaro, people are saying, "Oh, the poor are miseducated; they don't have access to education." Then they believe in misinformation. Actually, what I show in my research is that it's quite the contrary. The numbers of those who share and spread misinformation are actually those who belong to middle and upper classes. They are like in their 40s to 60s in terms of age. The reason why the poor, they don't share as much misinformation, at least back then, was because they believe that everything around them is there to trick them, because they live in a system that try to oppress and trick them all the time. So they don't take things for granted the way that the upper classes do. So they try to engage with online content more critically, because they know that, for example, I'll give an example here that I talk in my book. They are constantly being surveilled by drug cartels, either online or offline. They were really careful to the things that they posted on Facebook because they feared facing retaliations. So everything they consumed, everything they produced online was very cautiously thought of. So it wasn't just something that came out of their, mouth and then it's online. So that's what I saw in terms of misinformation, that they would take things really with a grain of salt. One example was I was talking to one of my informants, and one of the Boso army got infiltrated in her WhatsApp group, in the church WhatsApp group. And then this guy tried to say that, communism is wrong, socialism is wrong. The candidate from the Workers' Party is a socialist. We shouldn't vote for him, and try to explain what socialism was. And then her question was, well, you're here in our church group, so what you're describing is like describing the things that Jesus Christ did. It wasn't Jesus Christ a big socialist? So this is how they engage with the information constantly. So they always question, they always take things with a grain of salt, which really impressed me in a positive way. And it was a big wake-up call to those that belong in the upper classes that try to blame everything on the poor.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, that the lower classes may have a natural skepticism based on the history of how they've been oppressed, basically. And the middle class might be the most susceptible to misinformation because they may not be as skeptical of information they get. Do you feel like misinformation overlaps mostly with political campaigns and initiatives, or do you see it more broadly? Because when I think about it, at least here in the US, I feel like, as an example, the whole COVID thing, it's hard to decouple from a kind of evaluation of President Trump's work and now President Biden's effectiveness. And, depending on which side you want to advocate for, like you may have a unconscious, at least, bias to either play up or play down the pandemic. And but I'm just wondering, like, do you see misinformation well beyond the kind of political kind of points and tribalism?
No, that's a great question. So I believe that everything is political, but it gets problematic when these things get politicized, right? Those are different notions. The thing is, for you to keep a misinformation alive, if you want to gain from that misinformation, you need that sort of emotional charge, right? And because you need, for example, people to fear or people to be happy. So in the studies of how things go viral on the internet, for example, one of the findings is that the content that generate commotions are the ones who are likely to go viral, and the negative commotion, like anger or fear, are the ones that are more likely to go viral than the commotions that promote this sort of positive emotion. So it's no surprise that if we fear that our schools are if you go to the conservative camp and share something that the schools are getting flooded with CRT content, then that's going to go viral over a cute meme of a cat telling you good morning, right? Of course. So it really depends on how much you want to keep that misinformation alive and what kinds of political gains you want to get from it. If you want it to get, real political gains, then you're going to bring as much as emotions as you can around that misinformation, because that's what's going to keep that misinformation alive. It's almost as if they are interconnected, right? Like the emotion or the hate, let's say the fear is what keeps the misinformation alive. For example, if I tell you that the sky is red, you're going to tell me, no, it's blue. But then you're going to move away, because me telling you that the sky is red won't create any sort of commotion, any sort of fear onto you. But if I tell you something that messes with your belief system, with your faith system, that's where things get a little complicated in terms of maintaining that misinformation alive. So it really depends on the goal here. For example, during Trump's presidency, it felt like he was in a constant political campaign, right? He didn't feel like he was acting like a president, because he needed the people motivated and ready to fight for him, because he was not delivering. So the only way to tell people that he was actually doing something was actually to create this different reality to maintain the base alive and fighting for him.
Yeah, and you definitely see that, and I'm sure it happens on the parts of the left as well. But certainly, when I observe like Fox News or Newsmax or OAN, there's always like some huge controversy, like this attack on Christmas. Was a big one a few years ago. Like there's a huge effort to remove Christianity and all this kind of thing, or the CRT stuff. Like that was not a big deal until they made it a big deal. And I'm curious. You mentioned Trump. Obviously, we're now talking, shooting this on Feb 27th, and we're in the middle of an invasion. I know the Putin folks are describing it as a peacekeeping mission, but there's some military activity in Ukraine going on right now. And one of the things that I saw was the description by Putin and the Russian state-run media of the Ukrainians as like a Nazi regime that was attacking Russian culture and trying to start a genocide of Russian people. And I thought, my God, like that's not what I'm observing in the news that I'm consuming. And I'm curious what your thoughts are around states that participate in misinformation. And do you feel like what happens when the top of that pyramid is the government?
Yes, that's textbook state propaganda, right?
Yeah.
Where social media becomes just another tool, right? It doesn't add any nuances to how this propaganda is made, but it just adds nuances to how it's spread. Interestingly, Telegram was developed by Pavel Durov. He is a Russian-born that kind of got banned and kicked out of Russia. So got Telegram. So Telegram is banned on Russian territory because in 2014, Pavel Durov refused to give up information about Ukrainians fighting in Crimea, for example. So he got kicked out. Telegram got banned. The RT, or the Russian state media, keeps saying that Russian troops are only going to protect separatist regions that he declared independent. Russians didn't really know that Russian troops were going to Kyiv, for example. And they're trying, and now Russians are having access to this information through social media. What is interesting is that although Telegram is banned on Russia, the government has Russian channels on Telegram to inform those outside of Russia what is really happening. So not only they bring misinformation to their field, to their country, but also to Russians abroad. And this is problematic because now he has just banned I believe he banned Twitter. I think he said something about banning Facebook, because this is where people are seeing that, well, that's not what what he's telling us is not what he's doing. And of course, when you have the state being the influencers, right, the producers of the misinformation, then it becomes way more powerful, because then it's not only about misinforming, but it's about enforcing that misinformation. So you're having like thousands of people being arrested in Moscow for protesting against the war, right? You have folks not being able to be outspoken about their opinions, about the war. So it becomes way more violent, and to the point that it's the worst kind of consequences that you could have from misinformation.
Well, David, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I definitely would encourage people to check out your work and research. How should they? How can people who are interested learn more about what you're working on?
Yes. So my book, Technology of the Oppressed, which was published by MIT Press, it's open access. So it's free to download and read on my website, dnemer.com, or on social media. I'm David Nemer. So I post constantly about my work in Portuguese and English. So my work is very accessible. I try to make everything open access as much as I can.
Amazing, amazing. Well, stay safe and warm up there in Cambridge, and really appreciate you spending time and sharing your thoughts. I think it's so interesting to hear about misinformation, not just in the U.S. context, but also in Brazil, and a little bit talking about Russia and Ukraine, and how there's some common threads here. I guess the good news as Americans is like we're not the only ones dealing with this. But the bad news is like it's kind of a big problem for lots of places.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, we'll say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Thanks, David. Keep it real.
See you.
Bye. All right. That was David Nemer. What a cool conversation. And thank you to um, David for coming on, and Jordana, our producer, for doing some research and finding him. If you have other interesting guests that you'd like to see, feel free to recommend them in the comments, or tweet at me, or DM me, or email me, whatever you want. We're always up for it. Before we wrap up, I do want to say thank you to the people who make this podcast and this show possible. They are the Nerds for Humanity channel members. And if you're not a member and you're watching on YouTube, just click the join link and you can help support this content to keep these conversations going. At the highest level is our VP level, and that would be none other than who, Soldier One. So Soldier One is the senior vice president of the Nerds for Humanity. Thank you for being a member. And let me just share my screen so you can just see Soldier One in the big pixels. Then you have at the VP level, after Soldier One, is, according to Total Time as member, Kristen Slevin, Bike, and Stephen Jones. So thank you to our VPs. And then at the hardcore level, in order of time as member, you have Gene, David, DK, Jackalego, Kirsch, Mr. History, Byron, Mona, Susan, Vaughn, Yang, Tony, Robert, Dean, Stat, Galessa, Jay Perrin, AH, Jay Bryan, Vivian, Dana, Jason, and Parth. And you can see the oldest members have all of the little nerd avatar filled in. And then some of our newer members, they have like partial. That's how you can tell how long someone's been a member. And then at the verified level, starting at $1.99 a month, oldest members: Lisa, Albert, Brandon, Peter, Arez, Yermaman, Sophia, Mike, Jedwiga, Doris, Emerald, Lori, Ben, Roger, Rasta, Elizabeth, James, Emma, Hui, Ira, Patrick, Shoni, Jameson, Doctor, William, Karen, Monica, Ardent, Semery, David, Brittany, Alexandra, Juana, Warren, Lucky, Kevin, Emily, Finney, and H3. And our oldest members overall, irregardless of level, let's see, would be Lisa, Jean, Kristen, Albert, and Brandon. And our youngest members overall are Stephen, Finney, and H3 Simp. So thank you for supporting it. Appreciate it. And then last thing is I want to highlight, if you're interested in supporting candidates for 2022 who are bringing a fresh perspective and who are gathering a little early traction, check out ofthepeople.us, and I will go there right now. Of the people, and type today. Ofthepeople.us. Okay, there we go. Let's just give a shout out to who is trending on Of the People. And this is entirely based on number of recent approval votes. So it's a free open platform, nonpartisan. So you've got Dan Whitfield, Larry Sharp, Catherine Fleming Bruce, David Kim, and Gary Voter as our popular trending candidates. Our newest candidates on the platform are Larry, Jim, Gary, Neil, and Max Steiner. And all-time most approval votes since we started a couple years ago now, almost a year and a half ago, Christy Seelock, who goes by Vizerant on Twitter, Ali Dalzimer, Austin Zerl, Shervin Azami, Dan Whitfield, Lauren Hubbard, Josh Whale, and Larry Sharp. Wow, Larry's kind of already in the all-time list. If you are interested in learning more about any of these candidates, you just click on the candidate. You'll get a link to their campaign website. You can follow them on Twitter. You can vote to approve them. You can see what tags are associated with their policies, a little description, some recent tweets. And in the future, we're going to be adding the ability to do AMAs or Ask Me Anythings with these candidates. But that's how it works today. You can filter by policy. So if you said, hey, I'm mostly interested in UBI, you can then see who is now trending around UBI, which would be Dan Whitfield, David Kim, and Christy Seelock. So if you know any candidates that are not listed on Of the People, please tweet at them. Let them know that they should list themselves because it's free. It's open. We'll even create the profile for them if they want, so they don't have to do any of the technical work, or it really only takes a couple minutes. But that's it for this Sunday. Hope you all have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. And goodbye, nerds.